Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, May 22nd, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. In Riverside, the weather will reach a high of 81.1 degrees, with a low of 57.8 degrees, making for quite a mild day in the region. Coming up on today's show, we're examining how Iran is utilizing a new maritime authority to exert control over the Strait of Hormuz. We will also dive into the latest medical reports on why the drug Retatrutide is producing weight loss results that rival the effectiveness of bariatric surgery. Beyond those major topics, we have a full lineup of other news stories and updates to share with you. All this and more coming up on Alex's News, so be sure to stay tuned. Good morning, everyone. We're starting today with a story that's reshaping the global economy and the price of just about everything you buy. The Strait of Hormuz, that narrow waterway that carries roughly 20% of the world's oil, has become the center of a tense standoff between the United States and Iran. Joining us now to break it all down is our reporter Ethan. Ethan, good to have you.
Good morning, Grace. Yeah, this is one of those stories where the maps you grew up looking at suddenly mean something very different. Since late February, the strait has gone from being a shipping lane to what analysts are now calling a theater of, quote, maritime lawfare, end quote. And as of today, May 22nd, 2026, Iran is essentially trying to charge tolls on the world's most important energy corridor.
Okay, let's rewind a bit. How did we actually get here?
So back on February 28th, which is roughly 3 months ago now, the United States and Israel launched what they called major combat operations against Iran. The code name is Operation Epic Fury. It involved a devastating air campaign and was followed by a U.S. naval blockade. Iran's conventional navy took heavy losses, but Tehran didn't back down. Instead, they got creative, and that creativity is what we're now dealing with.
Creative how? What exactly has Iran done?
According to ABC News and Democracy Now!, Iran's government has stood up something called the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, or PGSA. It went operationally active just 4 days ago, on May 18th. Maritime Activity Reports, Inc., which publishes Marine Link, says the PGSA claims jurisdiction over a, quote, controlled maritime zone, end quote, of more than 22,000 square kilometers. In plain terms, Iran is asserting administrative control over the entire width of the strait.
The entire width? But the other side of that strait belongs to the United Arab Emirates, right?
Exactly, and that's the provocative part. The zone's eastern boundary runs from Kuhe Mubarak on the Iranian coast all the way to southern Fujairah in the UAE. The western boundary stretches from the southern tip of Qashm Island over to Al-Quwain, also in the UAE. So Iran is drawing lines right up to another country's coastline. The UAE has dismissed all of this as, quote, pipe dreams, end quote, and a clear violation of its maritime sovereignty.
So if a ship wants to sail through, what does Iran require?
Every commercial vessel is now supposed to coordinate with the PGSA and get a formal transit permit before entering the zone. Democracy Now! Reports the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, has already started escorting select ships through. One recent example was a shipment of Middle East oil bound for South Korea. But this so-called coordination isn't free. Iran is charging what it calls protection and transit fees.
And how steep are those fees?
Maritime Executive and other international shipping sources put the price tag at up to $2 million per vessel. That's per ship, per transit. And here's the really interesting part, Grace. Because of U.S. sanctions and the dominance of the dollar-based financial system, Iran won't accept dollars. The PGSA requires payment in Chinese yuan or in Bitcoin. So Tehran is essentially building a parallel toll system that sidesteps Washington entirely.
That has to drive the Trump administration crazy. What's been the response from Washington?
Fierce rejection. ABC News reports that Secretary of State Marco Rubio called the tolling system, quote, illegal extortion, end quote, and a, quote, textbook violation of international law, end quote. The Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, has issued a high-level advisory warning that any payment to the PGSA, regardless of currency, will trigger secondary sanctions. So if you pay Iran to pass through, the U.S. comes after you next.
That puts shipping companies in an impossible position. How are they handling it?
Analysts at Windward describe the global shipping industry as now, quote, bifurcated, end quote. There's basically a shadow fleet, mostly Chinese-linked and UAE-managed tankers, that's paying the tolls and keeping oil moving toward Asian markets. Then you have Western carriers like Maersk and MSC, which have largely suspended transits or are relying on U.S. military escorts under something called Operation Project Freedom. And then there's a third group, the stranded.
The stranded? Tell me about them.
Between 1,500 and 2,000 commercial vessels are just sitting at anchor outside the Strait, Grace. They're unwilling to risk Iranian seizure on one side and unwilling to risk U.S. sanctions on the other. So you have this enormous floating traffic jam of cargo, oil, and goods just waiting. And every day they sit there, the cost of global commerce ticks up.
President Trump has said the Iranian military is essentially finished. How accurate is that?
That's where rhetoric and reality really diverge. Speaking to U.S. Coast Guard Academy graduates, President Trump claimed the Iranian Navy and Air Force are, quote, gone, end quote, and that 158 ships were destroyed during Operation Epic Fury. And it's true that Iran's conventional blue water navy was severely degraded. But reports from RFERL and maritime executives say the IRGC, which is the paramilitary branch, used a 6-week ceasefire back in April to reconstitute its asymmetric capabilities.
Meaning what, in practical terms?
Meaning small, fast attack craft, land-based anti-ship missiles, and drones. They don't need a big navy to control a narrow strait. They just need enough swarming capability to make any transit dangerous. And the IRGC is using exactly those tools to enforce the PGSA's mandates right now. Iran has also warned that if fighting resumes, the conflict will, quote, extend beyond the region, end quote.
There are peace talks going on, I understand. Are those making any progress?
They've hit a serious wall. The talks are being mediated by Pakistan. MarineLink and Reuters report that oil prices jumped 3% this week, with Brent crude hitting $108.09 per barrel. That spike followed a directive from Iran's new supreme leader, Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, prohibiting the export of Iran's stockpile of near-weapons-grade uranium, the 60% enriched material, that directly rejects a core U.S. demand.
And what is the U.S. actually asking for in those negotiations?
According to materials reviewed by the Iranian Foreign Ministry, the U.S. proposal includes 3 big items. There's a 20-year moratorium on enrichment, the decommissioning of all but one nuclear facility, and crucially, no war compensation for Tehran. President Trump has said publicly that he's in, quote, no hurry, end quote, to sign a deal, and he's threatened to, quote, finish, end quote, operations if the regime doesn't comply.
Is everyone on the U.S. side aligned on that approach?
Not quite. Democracy Now! Reports real tension between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu has reportedly urged the U.S. to abandon diplomacy altogether and resume bombing. So you've got a split between, on one side, a White House willing to keep the blockade and wait, and on the other, an Israeli government pushing for military escalation. That dynamic is shaping everything happening at the negotiating table.
Let's bring it home for our listeners. What's all this doing to American wallets?
It's painful, Grace. The national average for gasoline has climbed to $4.53 a gallon. And the political fallout is real. ABC News and Punchbowl News report that House GOP leaders were forced to pull an Iran war powers vote yesterday, on May 21st. Leadership cited attendance issues, but the official roll call data suggests the real reason was that Republicans didn't have the numbers to defeat the measure.
So there's internal dissent inside the president's own party.
There is, and it's growing as gas prices climb. Globally, the International Energy Agency has warned that the combination of the strait's closure and depleting stocks could push the oil market into what they're calling a, quote, red zone, end quote, by summer. And the CEO of ADNOC Sultan Al-Jaber, cautioned that even if the conflict ended today, full oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz wouldn't likely return until 2027.
2027, that's a long shadow. So where does this leave us today?
It leaves the strait as a site of maritime lawfare, with Iran using the PGSA to institutionalize control over 20% of the world's oil consumption. The U.S. maintains its blockade and is, in the president's words, waiting for the right answers from Tehran. And the rest of the world, from shipping companies to drivers filling up at the pump, is paying for that standoff every single day.
Sobering reporting. Ethan, thank you so much for walking us through it.
Anytime, Grace.
Welcome back. A potential game changer in obesity medicine is making headlines this morning, with Eli Lilly unveiling Phase 3 results that some doctors are calling bariatric-level. Our health reporter Chloe is here to walk us through it. Chloe, good morning.
Good morning, Grace. Yes, this is a genuinely historic moment for obesity medicine. Eli Lilly released the Triumph-1 data yesterday, May 21st, just one day before we went on air. The experimental drug is called Retatrutide, and the numbers are unlike anything we've seen from a pill or injection before.
So when you say bariatric-level, you mean it's competing with surgery?
That's exactly the comparison researchers are drawing. According to Reuters, via AOL and PR Newswire, the trial involved 2,339 adults living with obesity or overweight, with at least one weight-related comorbidity, excluding diabetes. At the highest dose, 12 milligrams, patients lost an average of 28.3% of their body weight over 80 weeks. That works out to roughly 70.3 pounds, which is in the same neighborhood as gastric bypass results.
That's remarkable. And I understand the longer-term data went even further?
It did. In the 104-week extension, patients with a baseline BMI of 35 or higher who stayed on the 12 milligram dose lost an average of 30.3% of their body weight, or about 85 pounds. WRAL and ABC News noted that 65% of participants on that high dose dropped below a BMI of 30, meaning they were no longer clinically classified as obese, and 45.3% lost 30% or more of their total body weight.
Chloe, how does this drug actually work? I keep hearing the phrase, triple G.
Right, that nickname comes from the 3 hormone receptors it activates. Reuters and AJMC, the American Journal of Managed Care, explain it this way. The first G is GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1, which slows gastric emptying and signals fullness, and that's what Wegovy and Ozempic target. The second is GIP, glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide, which boosts satiety and helps break down sugar and fat, the mechanism behind Zepbound and Mounjaro. The third G is glucagon itself, which increases calorie burning and targets liver fat.
So it's hitting 3 pathways at once. How does that stack up against the drugs already on pharmacy shelves?
The gap is significant. Wegovy typically delivers about 15% weight loss, and Zepbound around 22.5%. Retatrutide is showing roughly 30% in the highest dose patients, so it's a meaningful leap forward. That's why analysts are talking about it as a new gold standard for severe obesity.
And it sounds like the benefits go beyond just the number on the scale.
They really do. Biospace cited earlier, Phase 2 data showing Retatrutide could clear up to 86% of liver fat, which makes it a serious candidate for fatty liver disease, what doctors now call NASH or MASH. Patients also lost nearly 10 inches off their waist circumference on average. And in related trials focused on knee osteoarthritis, patients reported a 75.8% reduction in pain scores.
What about the quality of that weight loss? There's been a lot of concern about people losing muscle along with fat.
That's a key question, and Peptide Fox reported on a pre-specified body composition substudy using DEXA scans. The ratio came out to about 75% fat loss to 25% lean mass loss. Investigators believe the glucagon component helps prioritize fat burning, especially visceral fat, while the GIP component may help protect muscle during rapid weight loss. That's a better profile than some earlier generation drugs.
Now let's talk side effects. Nothing this powerful comes for free, right?
Right, and JP Morgan and Reuters both noted the side effect profile is slightly more pronounced than Lilly's other drug, Mounjaro. Nausea was reported by 42.4% of patients on the high dose, along with diarrhea, vomiting, and constipation. Because of the glucagon activity, some patients also saw a temporary bump in heart rate that peaked around week 24, so this isn't a drug you start casually.
I also saw something called dysesthesia mentioned. What is that exactly?
Dysesthesia is a unique side effect that showed up in 12.5% of patients on the 12 milligram dose. It involves abnormal skin sensations, things like tingling, burning, or what some patients described as electrical shocks. However, HCP Live reported that most cases were mild and did not cause patients to stop taking the medication. Doctors will be watching that signal closely as more real-world data comes in.
Doctors are also warning about muscle and bone loss with such rapid weight reduction. How is Lilly addressing that?
Duke Health expert Dr. Susan Spratt warned on WRAL that rapid weight loss like this can cause significant muscle and bone density loss if nutrition and exercise aren't prioritized. So Lilly is pursuing a combination strategy. One key player is bimagrumab, a myostatin inhibitor designed to promote muscle growth. Lilly actually canceled a type 2 diabetes trial for bimagrumab because of new FDA requirements around incremental weight loss. But independent data from the BELIEVE trial showed that when bimagrumab is paired with GLP-1s, muscle loss dropped from 28% down to just 7.2%.
So there are also new lifestyle guidelines coming out alongside the drug?
Yes, and this is important for listeners. In conjunction with the Obesity Association, Lilly has released what they're calling person-centered standards for 2026. Patients on high-dose Retatrutide are advised to consume 2.0 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight and to engage in resistance training 2 to 3 times per week. The message is clear: the drug is not a standalone solution.
Lilly also has a new pill on the market. How does that fit into the picture?
That's Foundayo, also known as orforglipron, which was approved by the FDA on April 1st, just under 2 months ago. According to GoodRx and NPR, it's a once-daily small-molecule GLP-1 pill that can be taken without food or water restrictions, so it's much more convenient. But Retatrutide is roughly 2.5 times more powerful. Foundayo typically achieves around 11 to 12% weight loss versus 30% for Retatrutide.
Let's circle back to that comparison with surgery. Is Retatrutide really a substitute?
That's the big debate. ABC News and the New York Times have both highlighted the nuance here. The magnitude of weight loss rivals gastric bypass, which typically delivers 30 to 35%. But the durability is different, because surgery offers a permanent anatomical reset while Retatrutide requires lifelong use. Triumph-1 data showed a 12 to 15% weight regain within 6 months of stopping the drug.
And I imagine cost plays a major role in that conversation.
A huge role. Over a 10-year period, bariatric surgery costs around $25,000. A decade of Retatrutide injections is projected to run somewhere between $120,000 and $180,000. So even if insurance covers part of it, the long-term math favors surgery for many patients. That's going to shape conversations between doctors, employers, and insurers.
What does the competition look like? Lilly can't be alone in this space for long.
Definitely not. Novo Nordisk has a triple agonist called UBT251 in late-stage trials, showing 19.7% weight loss at just 24 weeks. Roche's dual agonist CT388 showed 22.5% loss at 48 weeks, with 26% of participants hitting the 30% threshold. And Amgen's Maritide is in Phase 3, offering the convenience of monthly or even quarterly dosing.
So when might patients actually be able to get Retatrutide?
Eli Lilly expects to submit the full data package to the FDA by late 2026, so roughly 6 months from today. A commercial launch is anticipated in 2027. While it may become the new standard for severe obesity, health officials are emphasizing that it remains a management tool, not a permanent cure.
Fascinating reporting. Chloe, thanks so much for breaking all that down for us this morning.
My pleasure, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. Alberta is attempting to pick Canada apart, or perhaps just find a part of the country it can call its own. Premier Danielle Smith has fueled the fire by adding a 10th question to the upcoming October 19th referendum. Voters will be asked whether the province should remain in Canada or begin the legal process for a future binding vote on separation. This move is intended to sidestep a May 13th court ruling that halted a citizen-led separatist petition due to a failure to consult with First Nations. While Smith herself intends to vote for the province to stay, she claims 700,000 citizens who signed competing petitions need a democratic release valve. This significant escalation sets the stage for a constitutional confrontation with Prime Minister Mark Carney's government. Those stakeholders like the Blackfoot Confederacy remain firm that separation would infringe upon their treaty rights. Moving across the pond, President Trump is making sure our allies do not feel poles apart. He announced via Truth Social that the United States will deploy an additional 5,000 troops to Poland, a move he directly attributed to his personal friendship with President Karol Nawrocki. This decision effectively reverses a Pentagon order from earlier this week that had canceled a planned rotation, a move that left military leadership in the dark and sparked confusion among NATO allies. While the Polish government and Secretary General Mark Rutte welcomed the reversal, the news reportedly caught Department of Defense officials by surprise, just as Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived in Sweden. This shift stabilizes the American footprint on the eastern flank at 15,000 troops, but highlights ongoing friction between Washington and Germany. In Indonesia, President Prabowo Subianto is ironing out the details of a massive trade shift. Starting June 1st, a newly established state-owned enterprise called PT Danantara Sumberdaya Indonesia will be calling the shots on all exports of key commodities like coal, palm oil, and iron alloys. The government is hoping to palm off an old system plagued by tax evasion, which has cost the nation an estimated $908 billion in lost revenue. While the mandate aims to stabilize the rupiah, the China Chamber of Commerce has warned that this could lead to a slippery slope for investment and supply chains. Coordinating Minister Erlangga Hartarto noted that certain partners, including the United States, may receive exemptions as the country moves toward full state control by September. A truly grave situation continues in Sudan as the conflict enters its 4th year. The International Committee of the Red Cross reports that over 8,000 people have gone missing since the violence began. Authorities in Khartoum are digging deep into the tragedy, revealing that 50,000 bodies were buried in makeshift, unmarked graves, including soccer fields and roadsides. While workers have exhumed and moved nearly 30,000 of these remains to proper cemeteries, identifying them remains a forensic nightmare since most labs and DNA testing facilities have been destroyed. This massive disappearance of citizens remains a central focus for the International Criminal Court as they investigate allegations of genocide. Finally, the Trump administration is chilling out on environmental rules. Alongside EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, the president announced a loosening of federal regulations on hydrofluorocarbons to help grocery stores and restaurants stay in the black. By extending deadlines to phase out these potent greenhouse gases in refrigeration and air conditioning systems, the administration expects to save businesses $2.4 billion annually. While grocery chains like Piggly Wiggly are bringing home the bacon with $800 million in direct savings, environmental groups are gasping at the news, arguing that these superpollutants will only undermine the global transition to safer technologies. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.6, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.